Marja from Sew Local Stitch Lounge. Today I'll be making this very cute canvas and cork tote bag. It was designed by Pat Bravo for Art Gallery Fabrics, and it's a free download on their website. I'm going to be using cork instead of vinyl, and if you haven't worked with cork before, the main thing you have to know is that you can't tear out your seams. But besides that one terrifying aspect of cork, it's surprisingly fun and easy to work with. One thing that we're going to be doing differently is that we'll be eliminating the ultra firm stabilizer because we're using cork instead of the vinyl. I'm going to quickly go over the supplies we'll be using for this project. You have 10 different fabrics, a mix of denim, canvas, and cork, as well as a woven cotton lining. There's a swatch card which shows how we'll be using each fabric in the pattern. You'll notice many of the fabrics count from more than one letter. On top of that, you have fusible fleece and 2 pre-cut cork straps, as well as thread, and you'll need a few sewing tools such as pins or clips, rotary cutter, marking tools, and a seam ripper, maybe. We'll find out. You're going to be cutting 4.5-inch squares of each fabric. Here's how many you need of each one. Now we're ready to start piecing the front and back of the bag. You're going to make 2 that look like this, and we can start sewing row by row. So I have my stack of squares from the first row, and I'm going to put them together piece by piece with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. First row's all together, and now I'm going to grab my next row. So all of the rows are sewn together now, and we're going to press the seams, and we're going to do this in a special way. We're going to take one row at a time and press all the seams off to one direction. The second row, the seams will be pressed the opposite direction, so that when you put it together, the seams will be sort of pushed the opposite direction so they don't have all the bulk in one spot. So the first row, all my seams are pushed off to the left side, my left side. So I'm going to push all these ones the opposite direction. Keep on doing that all the way down. So all the pieces are ironed, and now I'm going to start sewing the rows together. I want to make sure each seam matches up as best that I can. And you can always stretch it a little bit if they're not perfectly matched up. All right, off to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to carry on joining each row one at a time. So all 5 rows have been sewn together, so now we're going to iron each seam. And you can make the seam allowance point whatever direction you want. Now you're going to do the very same thing for the back of the bag. And you'll end up with these 2 pieces. And the next thing to do after that is to put your batting on, the fusible fleece. So the fusible fleece has one rough side, which is the glue side. So make sure that's against your fabrics. So I have the fusible fleece rough side up, and then my pieced bag on top of that. And I'm just gonna put a part of the lining fabric on top of this, just like a cover cloth, so that, because I don't like the ironing right on top of the cork. So now my fusible fleece is attached to the back of each one of my 2 bag pieces. So now I'm going to square it up, just trimming off anything that needs to be trimmed off to make it straight. It should be around 20 inches square, but it might be a little different. It's not a big deal. And now we're going to use this bag piece to create your lining. So you'll take this and cut out 2 pieces the same size. Now I'm going to put the front and back together and sew the sides and bottom. In the instructions it says a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but I'm going to stick with around 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. So the sides and bottom are sewn on the outside, and now it's time to do the same to the lining. The only difference is that we're going to leave a space about 5 or 6 inches open at the bottom, and I'm going to change my seam allowance as I go because I want my lining to be slightly smaller than the exterior bag so that it fits better inside. But we have to start with the same seam allowance you did with your exterior. So I'm going to start with the 3/8 and gradually bring it into a 1/2 inch on the sides and the bottom. I'm going to press the seams for both bags. I'm going to be making the box corners on both the lining and the exterior. So to do this, pull the opening at the top apart and line up the 2 side seams so that they're like that. And when you do that, you'll be able to see this triangle shape pointing out at the bottom. So my favorite way to do that is to use Carol's Box Corners marking tool. And we're doing a 3-inch box corner. So I'm lining this up with the center seam and just pulling it down till we're at the 3-inch line. And then I'm going to mark that line across. And we're going to sew across there. If you don't have this tool, you can buy one at Sew Local. Or you can use one of these guys. Basically, all we want to do is measure 3 inches across the corner, and that's where you're going to sew. Now I'm just going to cut off the excess here. And now we can turn it right side out. It's going to be so nice and big. Now we're going to make our straps. So you've got 2 pieces, and we're going to start by marking a line 1.5 inches in from one side. And we'll fold one edge up to that line. You can't use pins with your cork, so clips are a good way to go. We want the strap to end up 1 inch wide altogether. So you're going to fold the other side over. I'm using my mat to line it up to make it 1 inch. And then repositioning those clips on. So my strap's all ready to sew. I'm going to change my stitch length to 3. And I'm gonna sew down this whole strap 3 times, once in the center and once on either side. Now we're gonna mark the spot where the handle's gonna attach to the bag. Measure 3 3/4 inch in from each edge. Make sure the right side of the handle is down against the bag. And that the strap isn't twisted. And then do the same thing with the other side. Now we're going to sew the straps into place. I'm going to stitch 3/8 inch from the edge, and I'm going to back stitch quite a lot so that it's nice and strong. And now we're going to join the exterior and the lining. I'm going to put the exterior bag inside out again. And now I'm going to insert the lining, which is right side out, inside the bag. So we have right sides together. Start by matching up your side seams. And now I'm going to sew around a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Turn it right side out. I'm going to press the seam and top stitch the edge. I'm going to roll that top edge down just about 1/8 or less so that I'm not seeing any of the lining in the front of the bag. I'm going to top stitch around the whole outside edge of the bag, and I'm going to change to a longer stitch length. Top stitching's all done. The last thing to do is sew up the opening in the lining. I'm just going to put those folded edges together, and I'm going to sew with the sewing machine very close to those folds, about 1/8 from the edge. Now the bag is done. It really makes me feel like going to a market, but I can't.